decisions that are best for students when you kind of have this bigger controlling factor that the school board's pushing for, that equal factor versus equity.
Yeah.
So it's that political environment you talked about.
It is, and it varies so greatly from district to district. And I do have to say that's probably where I'm at a significant advantage in that we have an outstanding school board who, they are very student-centered, and so they navigate some of those issues maybe a little differently. And I think that, but again, it all goes back to whatever your context is. But I want to tap into one thing that you brought up that I think is a really essential question within this, or essential aspect to kind of wrap your head around with where you're at as a leader: equality versus equity. And are those always the same?
You all should be able to weigh in on this. We've had that conversation.
Oh, I don't mean to repeat a conversation.
It's okay. I think it's always good to ask the question.
Yeah, they're not the same. I mean, what Kelly's referring to in DeSoto is equal between the two schools. It doesn't have anything to do with based on equity and the need for that.
Yeah.
So there's definitely a difference.
Yeah, and I think the hard part is really trying to find out what is going to have that greatest impact on the equity, And I think you have to look at, I think that we kind of have this pendulum thing in schools and also in how schools are viewed. And I think unfortunately, as stressful as it is right now with how we're being viewed as educators from the outside world, as with everything, I always try to find out what was the one thing that we kind of brought on a little bit ourselves. And because I do think we do have to be critical and self-reflective, and I'm not saying we deserve this right now, but I do think this whole accountability and transparency aspect I do think there was a time when we threw a lot of resources at a lot of things, and we did not have any review of the data outcomes, anything to see if that was actually making a difference, or if we were just throwing money at things. And so I think that from there, as a leader, I try to always be mindful of that. So when we are making these changes, is that actually, what do I see in the data? Are there outcomes? Some of it won't be data, some of it's qualitative, some of it is, hey, we had this one student who showed a lot of potential, ELL student, we identified him for gifted ed. That's a victory. It may not show up on my data, but that was neat. We had a student who was culturally and linguistically diverse, but was gifted and talented, and we went through the process and made the process work to give them some additional opportunities. So you can't always measure it in data, but you should have qualitative or quantitative or qualitative data to show that something is making a difference. So if you were to say, this is a core tenet for us, which would be first-generation college students, and we want to see providing access and resources for students to access college as a first-generation college student, whether you pay for the AVID program or whether you do this. It's so important to go back. You have a responsibility to go back and look, has that made an impact? We've committed ourselves to this. We've allocated these resources. We can't just say, check the box, we've done it. You actually have to now look, did it actually have an impact? Did we have more students who, and I know that sounds very basic, but you'd be surprised. We get caught up so much in this job of living moment to moment, dealing with the latest crisis, dealing with the latest fire, dealing with the latest, patching people together, or, you can always, you could live in the immediate and the urgent if you allowed yourself. You have to force yourself to reflect and step back and collect yourself and look at the outcomes and what are we seeing, and is this working or is this not working? So good thing we get a little time in summer to collect a lot of data and do a lot of reflection in the summer. So, but I think that's, so when you start looking at how do you make those decisions with how you spend that money, those programs, I do think there is a responsibility within that to look at, is that decision, are those resources yielding our intended outcome? And I think that when we see that change start to happen, that's when we start to see, you know, maybe it is okay to allocate these additional resources because it is making a difference. And, you know, again, it all goes back to, we can put a lot of resources in a lot of different areas, but if we're not utilizing them well, or we haven't built our larger system, and I'm going to wander back a minute, if I may.
That's okay.
So going back to our school that was going through the changing demographics, I can put a lot of programs in place, I can spend a lot of dollars, and I can do a lot of things. If I don't have a healthy culture within my staff who is seeing the value of that change and who is embracing that change and recognizing the potential of our students instead of just recognizing obstacles, and that's not to say that I'm not being critical of teachers. I'm saying you have to lead them in that direction, because people, as I said before, will always gravitate to what's comfortable and familiar and what they've known. And change is scary, and sometimes change equals bad things, you know? So if you don't have that healthy culture, if you don't have that culture where the teachers are fierce advocates for kids, if they don't, in their core values, believe that all kids can be successful, if that's not a core value they hold, I could spend millions of dollars on programs and I'm not going to have any different outcome, because that's just not a belief that person holds. And so transitioning to another question on here, ethical issues when hiring. There are a lot of things that I can coach and a lot of things that I can fix. I cannot coach or fix a person's just core belief system. And when you hire, you know, set the bar high. You want that person who is, for us at high school, expect nothing less than they have excellent content skills and they're fierce advocates for all kids. That's what our kids deserve. And so go weekends, Skype, whatever you need to do to get that candidate. Hiring is honestly the single most important thing that you can get right in your job. If you hire good people, if you hire people with a good attitude, a good heart for kids, good character, and if you can hit that, they know their content well, that's when you can really make great things happen in your building. But
it's a powerful statement. I mean, I agree 100%. That is very rich. I agree.
And so, good. I'm glad.
Yeah.
Because
Sorry.
I'm glad you said that, because that's one, I mean, I'm out there on. That's something that, you know, I feel very strongly about. And our students deserve that. They deserve to go into that classroom and have the experience we would want for every single one of our own children. And if that's not happening, we have an ethical responsibility to address that issue and have those tough conversations. One thing as an administrator, you know, you cannot be afraid to have some difficult conversations with people. It will not fix itself. I think you all know that. But you can do that, and coming back to the ethics of it, you know, people will say, well, you can't, you know, it's impossible. If the teachers attain tenure, it's impossible to, you know, address that issue. It's not true. It's difficult, but it's not impossible. The dance of the lemons, I don't know if you've all, yes.
Absolutely.
You know, that's been a struggle, because that has happened. I mean, I love our district and I love the people I work with, and I think now as a team we have a better perspective on that, but I think there was a time when that was a common practice. You know, I'm still cleaning up a situation. I'm not perfect, but, and I'm sure I've had my share of mistakes, but cleaning up a situation where this person has been, you know, in every high school in our district, has been there 8 years, has had strong evaluations. I'm now on 3rd year of plan because it's going to take that long and that much data to undo those prior years. But you have to go into it, and realize if it's not what kids need, then you have to go through that process. And I also feel like ethically it's appropriate for that teacher as well, because if this is the only feedback they've been given, they deserve an appropriate chance to improve. And they will either take your guidance. Oh, no, go ahead.
Sorry. No, I keep wanting to interrupt you.
No, go ahead. No, I want it to be
There's some little
conversational.
nuggets in there. So does everybody really understand what she means by dance of the lemons? Okay, I just want to be sure. Don't just nod your head. All right. So to your point, not only maybe they're getting positive feedback or inaccurate feedback, maybe they're not getting any feedback at all. They're just transferred to the next school because a conversation happens behind closed doors and there are these lists of concerns that are expressed and they're just magically transferred to the next building. So you're right, we do have some ethical responsibility to that teacher to say, here are the concerns and we want to give you an opportunity to improve. All right, yes.
Absolutely. And again, I would go back to that's one of those things where that piece is in place, and it is difficult to do that because of factors that has that person attaining tenure, and so, or past their 3 years, and so it should be harder because obviously we haven't maybe given honest feedback prior to that. And so it is a good process to go through. It does take a lot of time, and it is easy to want to just abandon that process, but it's good for the teacher, and they're going to ultimately make the decision. They will, because you provide enough support in that plan, they will either change, and improve, or the capacity is just not there, and this is not a good fit for them. They may be great in another avenue or another arena, but this isn't a match for their skill set. And you just cannot afford year after year to have students go through that experience. It's just not good for them. And so that goes back to you find a way to allocate the time, and that's your longer term. So you have your urgent, your emergency, your immediate and urgent needs. You have your longer term plans, and you just have to be patient. And that's hard in our jobs because we deal with a lot of immediate. So we have to also be able to step back and say, this isn't going to be immediate. We have to be patient. We have to see the process through.
What's the frequency on that kind of dance of the lemons or the passing of the, is this something that you deal with every year? Is there one that emerges every year, or is it?
I would say previously, yes. Yeah, okay. And sometimes multiple in a year.
Wow.
Sometimes multiple in a year.
Wow.
Now I think it's definitely, I've noticed a shift the last year or two to where that's curbed a little bit more, which is good. And and I do think it's important. And this, if any of you're a district leader, any district leader aspirations? Okay. The superintendent, in conjunction with the board, but the superintendent, it's hard to underestimate the importance of their message and their tone and where they set that bar for your district. And I've worked with a lot of great people during my time, but there's, we say some things, but it's when you say things and actions happen that you start to see how pieces move to get to make that action or vision a reality that becomes important. So you start to say, this is not okay. You have someone who sets the tone to say, no, really, the dance of the lemons, it's not good for kids. That's not okay. Whether it's your superintendent directly, whether it's your HR superintendent, depending on the sizes of your district, your director of secondary, whoever. But it's important for them to stand up and say, and take a stand on those issues. And say, ethically, this is not good for our kids. We need to address these issues, and we need to make it right for kids.
And I think
not
it's
just pass the problem.
The action of it. I mean, because you hear those things, right? And they just kind of say it, but there's no movement on it.
Right. Or people are still slipping under the radar. Yeah. And that's where, and I think that's where we also as leaders have to be able to have some difficult conversations with each other. You cannot possibly think that this person was a high quality teacher when you sent them to me. Did they just all of a sudden have all these problems, or were these issues with you, or issues in your building, not with you? but were these issues in your building? And sometimes you have to kind of have that conversation with the colleague.